So I've drawn this diagram out probably 4 or 5 times in the last few weeks because I've been talking to students a lot more. And the idea of this is to explain the first few years out in practice, the transition from graduating to 2 years out of practice and wondering why. Maybe you think about dropping out, maybe you think about starting your own practice, you're looking for another job. Like it's pretty a turbulent time in our careers. And I think in the past, we've just blamed it on the profession. I think it's naturally intrinsic, like what we do and what we value is what actually causes the problem. And then it's a mismatch between what we don't know and what we think we know. So the whole point of this is just to try and help mainly, like I can't obviously speak to every grad. So hopefully this can at least provide them some value if you ever come across a video like this. So what I call this is it's just a chiropractic bell curve where it's like the spectrum of how we can practice, like within in chiro. On the far left hand side here, this is like a rehab bro. So if you think like as far rehab bro as you can, that guy thinks manipulations are a scam, right? Like that's that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the exact opposite of the rehab bro, which is the philosophical boomer who thinks that their mere presence is going to solve all the world's problems. You know, they just walk in, they got like a god complex. It's an issue. But anyway, so they're all the way down that end. When you sort of can understand the like what the goalposts are, what you can come to appreciate is that you're going to fall somewhere in there. And there is a zone between here, which is where the majority is, like the bell curve, that we can all sort of get along. Like the ones on the ends, they seem to hate each other online and make the most noise, cause the most problems, create the most stereotypes. But the majority of us, we fall within this realm where we can deal with, like if we're a little bit more philosophical than someone who's a bit more exercise based, we can just deal with it and it's fine because at the end of the day, you're just helping people. So I think understanding, like, first of all, that there's a spectrum that exists. And then secondly, how do you, like, where do you fit on this and what does the real world look like? So I think you can appreciate most of us, maybe one or two of you are going to be on here and you're going to be like, I'm a rehab bro, F you, whatever. But the majority of you are going to fall within this barrier. Now, if you think of like practice, how practices practice or how they operate, the more philosophers, oh my God, philosophy-based practices, they are going to go, they're like those more high volume clinics. Okay. So they are more weight on the adjustment. That's kind of what that looks like. Whereas if you go this other end, it's more like a lower volume practice. So straight away, knowing high and low volume, you may think makes more money, makes less money. That's how the whole industry thinks. It's not the case. I can show you that later. But for now, that's kind of the spectrum. So it's like, if you want to go out there, get your skills really fast, see high volume, probably make better money, you're going to be more towards that philosophy side of things. So you're going to be naturally attracted, like when you come out and graduate, to a high volume practice is kind of the label there. Whereas if you're more like, you're against that sort of high volume model, you want to look after people more, spend a bit more time with them, you're going to be more on the low volume end of the spectrum, almost probably more aligning with like physio. And that's kind of the stereotype. But what you might find is it's like, oh, it's harder to get a job because these guys seeing less patients don't necessarily have as many jobs available as these guys do. Like there's no big groups in the industry that are rehab based clinics that can take on associates purely because of the business models that they're running, but they can in future. Okay. So when we come out of uni, I think in our heads have an idea of like where we sit, which is good. The issue is we don't know what we don't know. So you don't know how far this can stretch. And you also, so first of all, like where you place yourself, say you place yourself there, you might think that you're there. So then you go and find a job and you're like, oh, I'll find it's like, it's similar. I like the vibe. I really want to practice here. So then you go and get a job and you think that that job's there as well. 6 months, I've just had a convo with someone, it was 3 months, but between 6 months to 2 years, people sort of start to become self-aware. And I think what's happening is it's you realizing either one, you don't want to be there. Maybe you're over here or over here. And two, sorry, the practice that you have started to work at isn't actually there. It's over there. And because you didn't know, there's a misalignment there. And that's where, associateships can start to break down, start to hate the job, hate the profession, all of that sort of stuff. Now, the ones who drop out are the ones who don't realize that there's a spectrum here and they think that that's the only way to practice. Now, by the way, burning out, high volume, overworking, practicing a way they don't want to practice, drop out of the profession, rehab guys, less work to the extent that they don't make enough money, they're better off pouring beers at the pub, drop out of the profession and go and do something else. Okay. So the dropouts happen on both ends. Neither one's right, but neither one are the problem either. It's the fact that you're maybe working out of a misalignment that actually causes the majority of the issues. So in your first 6 to 12 months, 6 months to 2 years, sorry, I think when you graduate, you're going to come out and you're going to go, okay, I'm here. Just like in your head, go, I don't know everything though, so I'm probably wrong, but I think I'm here. Then go and find a job that you think is there as well. Again, you're probably going to be wrong, but just try and do it. As you get through your next 6 months to 2 years, you're going to go, you're either going to go, I'm not here, or this practice isn't where I thought it was. And that's completely fine because you're growing and you're changing and you're becoming more aware of what's going on in the profession. At that point, instead of getting frustrated and thinking that it's the profession that's the issue, it's the way you're practicing in the model. So when you start to get a bit, you need to go and work out where you sit on this spectrum, because otherwise you're going to go and find another job and you're going to get it wrong again. And you're going to hate that job as well. And then you're going to be like, oh, it's chiro. That's what the issue is. It's not. It's that you haven't found the way you want to practice. Okay. So that's kind of the chiro bell curve and how it can affect your transition out into practice. Now, some reasons, like getting into some business metrics and how things work. The reasons the businesses on this end of the spectrum have more associateships available is simply because they have a higher revenue. So they see more people, hence they are busier, hence they have more work. They don't necessarily have margin. So you can be making $1 million, but spending 950,000 of it to run the freaking business. So the margin can be really thin. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's the perfect way to practice. It doesn't mean that that's where you should go as an associate. On this end of the spectrum, these guys are usually generally solo practitioners that see less patients, but they're sort of more like ethically, I'm looking after people better than these guys. The reason these guys don't have associateships as readily available is because usually they're not advertising as much as these guys because their revenue is not as high. These guys might actually be making the same amount of money as these guys, but they don't have the stream of patients that these guys do because they're playing a pretty heavy marketing game. So typically, if someone comes to me in my agency, they're going to be some kind of higher volume because they've got the revenue and they're like, hence pay the marketing and we'll play that marketing game, which by the way is not perfect, but that's just what happens. Whereas these guys are a little bit more stringent because they're not recommending as much. They don't make as much per patient, if that makes sense. Like they're not recommending as much. So therefore they can't afford to invest as much into marketing. So they're sort of generally, they have like a lower profile. It's like internal referrals, gyms. They're real community driven people. If these guys actually worked their numbers out though, they would be surprised at what they could do with marketing. And then the associateships may open up, but a lot of the people who work on sort of more towards this end of the spectrum, they are more individualistic. Like they don't really want associates. So it is tough to get an associateship with them. You'll probably be better off finding like two part-time jobs at two different ones to learn from them. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it is more of an individual journey, which you may be going on yourself and you're just looking for a little bit of guidance. So the way to win on this end is to stay very lean. Don't go and buy a huge practice. Start small and then just build your base internally, build a community, work out your margin. So if you recommend 10 visits and it's $1,000 total, don't spend more than $100 on marketing. Simple as that. Then on the other end of the spectrum, it's the same model. Like you've got a higher revenue, keep your costs as low as you can. But naturally, just because you've got, a higher product, even if you may recommend 30 visits, so then you're making $3,000, so then you've got more of a marketing budget to play with and you can do other stuff. But that is pretty much sort of the spectrum of why like high volume seems to have more jobs and more money involved. Low volume doesn't seem to appear as like as much in terms of the job realm, but both of them are as lucrative as each other. But if if you go and do this one or this one, but you're like where you are in terms of how you want to practice doesn't align with one of those, worst case scenario, you're going to build a practice that you don't like and people do it all the time. Then it's very hard to change. You're going to drop out of the profession or you're going to keep bouncing between jobs and hate it. So first thing you need to do is work out, okay, cool. Have a guess. Like if you've just graduated or you're graduating, have a guess where you are, have a guess where the practice is that you want to work at, sit there for 6 months, 2 years. If you start to feel that feeling and you're like, I need to move on, then be like, all right, cool. It doesn't matter which one I do, I can still make good money. I need to make sure that wherever I land is exactly the practice that I want to build. And typically that is going to come from knowing what the problem is you solve and who you solve it for, because that will help you develop the practice around that person, which will naturally sit you on one side or the other. So if it's, typical ones like sports and all that sort of stuff. It's like, okay, well, they need a little bit more time. They need training. They need assessment. So we're probably going to be closer to this end of the spectrum. Family, more family practice is sort of that end. But again, it's like, if you were truly doing a family practice, you want to make sure you got space for the kids, for the mum, for the pram. Like you actually got to build your practice around who you target, basically. So anyway, that's kind of the convo that I've been having with a lot of people. Lately in particular, I think just because I'm talking to more students, this would have been nice, even for myself. I did that typical, like, thought I was here, was over here, bouncing around a bit until I sort of found the middle. But hopefully that just sort of gives you a bit of a clarity around like like where the future's going. If you are feeling a little uncertain, why you might be feeling uncertain. It's not the profession, it's the job that you're in, like the problems that you're solving. And then how to get out the other side of it is to get really clear on what the problem is you want to solve, who you want to solve it for, and then what that care looks like, because that will naturally find where you sit on that spectrum. And then you can sort of just go from there. So anyway, hope that helps.